August 1943. In the pale light of dawn over occupied France, mist drifts across the cracked concrete of a Luftwaffe airfield. The air is heavy with the scent of oil, cold metal, and defeat. But among the German aircraft lined in precision, Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, and training planes, sits something alien. A massive American fighter. A P-47 Thunderbolt. Its dull olive skin is scarred, its insignia half-scorched. The white star of the United States Army Air Forces now rests beneath the black cross of the Luftwaffe. To the Germans, this was no ordinary prize. This was a trophy, grotesque and magnificent, a symbol of dominance over an enemy that ruled the skies. As the morning shift assembled, whispers spread. The story was unbelievable. A Thunderbolt captured intact, forced down after engine failure, now wearing German markings. At the center of it all was Oberleutnant Hans Werner Schulz, the Luftwaffe's chief technical officer on base. Schulz was methodical, almost reverent, as he inspected the strange machine. He had studied Allied aircraft from reports, but never stood beneath one. The P-47 dwarfed the German fighters. Its Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, a 2,000 horsepower monster, gleamed beneath its battle-worn cowling. Its wings, thick and brutal, looked less like those of an airplane and more like armor plates shaped by the wind. Schultz's men circled it cautiously. They touched the flak-riddled fuselage as if it were sacred, a machine that had once hunted them, now fallen silent in their hands. This was not just a curiosity. It was an opportunity. The Luftwaffe's intelligence branch, Versuchsverband OBD.L, had been desperately seeking to understand American technology. Every bolt, every control surface, every radio frequency could hold the key to countering the devastating Allied air offensives. The captured P-47 was about to become Germany's most valuable laboratory subject. By noon, a transport convoy arrived, mechanics, photographers, and engineers from Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's secret test center. Orders came directly from Berlin. Preserve it. Study it. Fly it. The aircraft was to be repainted. Gone were the U.S. insignia, in their place, the black cross of the Luftwaffe, and beneath the cockpit, a bright yellow band identifying it as a captured Butflugzeug, an enemy aircraft repurposed for German use. The sight was grotesque, a machine built for freedom now serving its enemy. When German test pilot Hauptmann Karl-Heinz Lang first climbed into its cockpit, he was struck by its sheer size. Everything felt foreign, the switches, the layout, the instruments labeled in English. But what impressed him most was its ruggedness. "This is no fighter," Lang reportedly remarked to a colleague. "It's a flying tank." What the Germans learned over the following weeks would deeply unsettle their engineering teams. The P-47, unlike their sleek Bf-109s or nimble FW-190s, was built with one principle above all: survivability. Its massive radial engine could absorb enormous punishment. Its fuel tanks were self-sealing. And its 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, 4 per wing, could tear through a German fighter before it even got within range. But the Thunderbolt's greatest weapon was not its guns, it was its altitude. When flown at high level, the P-47 was nearly untouchable. Its turbo-supercharger system, a marvel of American engineering, allowed it to maintain full power at altitudes where most German fighters began to gasp for air. As the Luftwaffe analyzed the system, they realized something horrifying: no German aircraft of the time could match it. Not even the feared Focke-Wulf 190A. This revelation reached Berlin like a cold wind. For years, the Reich's propaganda had portrayed German engineering as the world's most advanced. But the P-47, brutal, heavy, and unrefined, shattered that illusion. While engineers dissected the Thunderbolt's systems, pilots at Rechlin began mock dogfights: P-47 versus Bf-109, P-47 versus FW-190. Every test ended the same way. The Thunderbolt might lose in a turning fight, but it always escaped. Its dive speed was unmatched, a steel meteor plunging earthward faster than any Luftwaffe fighter could follow. German pilots nicknamed it Der Koloss, the Colossus. To them, it wasn't just a plane. It was a symbol of an industrial power that Germany could no longer rival. The Thunderbolt's trial. The first test flight of the captured P-47 took place under a gray, windswept sky at Rechlin Air Base in northern Germany. It was early September 1943. The airfield was lined with officers, engineers, and Luftwaffe technicians, men whose careers depended on understanding this American monster. Hauptmann Karl-Heinz Lang, the same pilot who had called it a flying tank, stood beside the machine in his leather flight jacket, scanning the controls one final time. The mechanics had replaced nothing unnecessary. They wanted to see how it performed as it had in American hands. The aircraft still bore the faint outlines of U.S. insignia beneath its new German markings, a ghost of allegiance half buried under black paint. When the engine started, the earth shook. The roar of the Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial echoed across the field, deeper and more thunderous than any German inline engine. The Luftwaffe officers exchanged uneasy looks. It sounded less like an aircraft and more like an artillery barrage. The Thunderbolt did not idle, it demanded to fly. Lang taxied slowly, testing the brakes, the flaps, the responsiveness of the controls. Then he pushed the throttle forward. The P-47 lunged ahead with a guttural growl, lifting its enormous frame into the air. The moment it left the ground, it seemed to shed its weight, climbing steeply into the cold northern sky. Observers craned their necks as the distant shape of the Thunderbolt performed a series of wide loops, dives, and climbs. It moved with surprising grace for something that weighed nearly 8 tons fully loaded. But what impressed the German engineers most was how effortlessly it climbed. The turbo-supercharger worked flawlessly. Even at high altitude, where Luftwaffe fighters lost significant power, the P-47's engine output remained stable. It could reach over 400 miles per hour and maintain combat power at 30,000 feet, numbers that confirmed their fears. The Germans had built elegant killers. The Bf-109 and Fw-190 were precision instruments, light, fast, and efficient. The Thunderbolt was something else entirely, an industrial hammer forged for endurance and brute strength. It was designed to outlast rather than outmaneuver. Lang landed after 45 minutes, sweat freezing on his forehead as he climbed out. He had tested hundreds of aircraft, but none like this. "It feels indestructible," he told Schulz, who was taking notes at the edge of the runway. "Clumsy, yes, but invincible." Over the following weeks, Rechlin's engineers dissected every inch of the P-47. They measured the thickness of its armor plating, studied the turbocharger's complex network of pipes and turbines, and analyzed the gunsight that allowed American pilots to make deadly accurate passes at high speed. They were stunned by its complexity. The turbocharger alone was a masterpiece of mechanical design, an interconnected system of ducts and gears that captured exhaust gases to compress intake air at high altitudes. It gave the P-47 more consistent power than any German aircraft engine. The Luftwaffe's own high-altitude interceptors, like the Bf-109G series, relied on simpler mechanical superchargers. They worked well at medium altitude but suffered as air pressure dropped. The Thunderbolt system, though bulky, provided unmatched performance for long-range escort missions, especially over Europe, where bombers needed protection deep inside German airspace. That single feature, altitude power retention, was what made the Allies unstoppable in the skies above the Reich. German pilots tested the Thunderbolt and simulated dogfights against their own fighters. The results were sobering. In close turns, the P-47 was slow and unresponsive. Any skilled Luftwaffe pilot could outmaneuver it. But in dives and climbs, it was untouchable. It could descend from 25,000 feet in seconds, reaching speeds over 500 miles per hour without structural failure. German aircraft attempting to follow risked breaking apart. Over the following weeks, Rechlin's engineers dissected every inch of the P-47. They measured the thickness of its armor plating, studied the turbocharger's complex network of pipes and turbines, and analyzed the gunsight that allowed American pilots to make deadly accurate passes at high speed. They were stunned by its complexity. The turbocharger alone was a masterpiece of mechanical design, an interconnected system of ducts and gears that captured exhaust gases to compress intake air at high altitudes. It gave the P-47 more consistent power than any German aircraft engine. The Luftwaffe's own high-altitude interceptors, like the Bf-109G series, relied on simpler mechanical superchargers. They worked well at medium altitude but suffered as air pressure dropped. The Thunderbolt system, though bulky, provided unmatched performance for long-range escort missions, especially over Europe, where bombers needed protection deep inside German airspace. That single feature, altitude power retention, was what made the Allies unstoppable in the skies above the Reich. German pilots tested the Thunderbolt and simulated dogfights against their own fighters. The results were sobering. In close turns, the P-47 was slow and unresponsive. Any skilled Luftwaffe pilot could outmaneuver it. But in dives and climbs, it was untouchable. It could descend from 25,000 feet in seconds, reaching speeds over 500 miles per hour without structural failure. German aircraft attempting to follow risked breaking apart. The Ghost in German colors. By early December 1943, the once proud American fighter had become a strange ghost on German airfields. Painted in Luftwaffe markings, it looked like something unnatural, an enemy-turned-servant, a weapon dissected but never truly understood. Test pilot Hauptmann Karl-Heinz Lang began to notice something unsettling during his later flights. Every time he took the Thunderbolt into the air, mechanics would stop what they were doing and watch. Not out of admiration, but out of something closer to disbelief, as though the aircraft represented the impossible. The Americans had designed a machine that could take punishment, shrug it off, and come home. The Germans, by contrast, had built machines that demanded perfection, precise maintenance, high-octane fuel, and constant tuning. The P-47 didn't care. It was crude, heavy, and sometimes ugly, but it worked. That difference captured the entire war in miniature. In Recklin's cold hangars, engineers tried to replicate the American turbo-supercharger system. They dismantled it piece by piece, tracing each pipe and valve. The system was a marvel, a mechanical labyrinth that maintained consistent power at altitude by recycling exhaust gases to compress intake air. For German engineers, it was like studying alien technology. They attempted to design similar high-altitude systems for their own fighters, such as the Ta-152 and experimental Me-155, but none reached the same level of reliability. The problem wasn't intellect, it was industry. The complexity of the Thunderbolt's system required precision manufacturing on a massive scale, something that German factories, under constant bombardment, could no longer provide. By January 1944, the Luftwaffe's intelligence branch compiled a secret report titled Erfahrungen mit P-47 Thunderbolt, Experiences with the P-47 Thunderbolt. It was distributed only to high command and select fighter group leaders. The report warned, in energy retention and dive recovery, the American Thunderbolt surpasses all existing German fighter types. Pilots are advised not to follow in steep dives and avoid extended vertical engagements. This simple document changed how German pilots fought. No longer did they chase fleeing Thunderbolts downward, doing so was suicide. Instead, they attacked from above or waited for slower bombers to enter their gun sights. But even as the Luftwaffe adapted, the Allies evolved faster. By mid-1944, the P-47 had transformed from a defensive escort into a fearsome ground attack machine. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns could shred trains, convoys, and tanks. It became known as the Jug, short for Juggernaut. German troops on the ground learned to fear its distant roar, a deep thunder that rolled across the sky before the strike. The same roar that once echoed through Rechlin now haunted the eastern and western fronts. Some Luftwaffe pilots even claimed to have seen the captured P-47 again, flying under German colors during mock engagements near Berlin. To the Americans, this was unimaginable. But among German pilots, it became a legend. They called it der grotesk Donnerschlag, the grotesque thunderclap. A symbol of irony and despair. By late 1944, As fuel shortages crippled German operations and Allied bombers filled the skies, the test flights of the captured Thunderbolt quietly ceased. The aircraft, once studied obsessively, was now just another artifact of a war slipping away. Its engine was drained, its instruments stripped for study, and finally it was left in a corner of Recklin's hangar, a relic surrounded by dust and silence. When Soviet troops captured the airbase in 1945, they found the remains of the aircraft still bearing faint traces of both U.S. stars and German crosses, two nations' symbols layered upon one another, representing the strange intersections of war. The Soviets photographed it, examined it briefly, and then scrapped it for metal. But in a way, the grotesque Thunderbolt never truly disappeared. Its story lived on in the tactical manuals of both sides. The Luftwaffe learned respect for American engineering. The Allies learned how their machines inspired both fear and fascination in their enemies. The P-47 had proven something larger than any single victory, that wars are not won by elegance or genius alone, but by endurance, production, and willpower. It was more than an airplane. It was the embodiment of industrial strength, the sound of democracy forging thunder in metal. And though the captured Thunderbolt at Rechlin was long gone, its echo, that deep, defiant roar, remained in the memories of those who heard it. A sound that told them, in no uncertain terms, that the balance of the war had shifted forever. Epilogue: the aftermath of a trophy. When the war finally ended in 1945, the grotesque trophy of occupied France, the captured P-47 Thunderbolt, stood as a silent witness to a world turned upside down. Its fuselage, still bearing the fading insignia of the U.S. Army Air Forces, was discovered in the ruins of a Luftwaffe testing field near Rechlin. The paint was scorched, the propeller bent, and the canopy shattered. But it was unmistakably American, a symbol of the strange intimacy of war, where enemies learned from one another even as they sought each other's destruction. The Allied intelligence teams that examined it were astonished. The Germans had meticulously documented every inch of the P-47, its fuel mixture system, turbo-supercharger layout, and even the internal wiring of its radio circuits. In a sense, the Luftwaffe's engineers had learned to respect the machine they once mocked as clumsy and overweight. Some of those captured German reports later found their way into Allied engineering archives, influencing post-war aircraft development across Europe. Yet, for all its technical worth, the captured Thunderbolt also carried a more human meaning. For the Luftwaffe pilots who flew it, men like Hauptmann Otto von Mullen and his technicians, the aircraft became a strange companion, a mirror of their own dwindling hopes. Every test flight reminded them of what Germany lacked: the industrial power, the raw material, the endless convoys that kept the Allies flying when their own skies darkened with defeat. For the Americans, discovering one of their own aircraft in enemy colors was an unsettling sight. It symbolized vulnerability, a reminder that even the mightiest machines could fall into enemy hands. But it also spoke to the resilience of innovation, that even when copied or corrupted, the original design stood as a testament to Allied engineering superiority. As the Cold War dawned, former enemies became reluctant collaborators. Many of the Luftwaffe's surviving engineers, men who had once analyzed the P-47's metal and mechanics, were recruited by Allied powers. Their knowledge contributed to jet propulsion, radar technology, and early missile guidance systems. In this way, the strange tale of a single captured aircraft became part of the larger, intertwined story of post-war aviation progress. Decades later, in a French field reclaimed by grass and silence, fragments of that Thunderbolt were found, aluminum panels warped by heat, a fragment of its cockpit dial, and a single .50 caliber casing embedded in the soil. To most, they were nothing but debris. But to historians, they were echoes, remnants of a time when innovation and desperation collided at 400 miles per hour. The captured P-47 never returned home. But its story, one of irony, ingenuity, and grim fascination, survived through photographs, test logs, and the memories of those who witnessed it. It was a grotesque trophy, yes, but also a lesson. A reminder that even in the chaos of war, human curiosity endures. That engineers, pilots, and mechanics, on both sides, shared an unspoken reverence for the machine. And that in understanding the enemy's creation, they also confronted their own reflection. The war ended. The Thunderbolt's metal decayed. But its story, a tale of theft, obsession, and technological respect, still hums faintly in the engines of every fighter that came after.